Welcome back to Open Line. Talking about the presidential race, we have with us Thomas Schwartz, Vanderbilt professor of history. A lot of historical things to think about in this election. But let's just go back to the phones. A lot of calls here. Let's go to Taylor. Hello, Taylor.
Hey, Ben. Good evening to the professor. I would suspect that most of the professor's colleagues over at Vanderbilt to be voting in the Democratic Party, and it's probably hard to get any conversation even outside that. But let me take a couple of issues with some statements. First of all, on the immigration part, which the last lady just spoke of, I think it's going. That rate's only like number 4 of the top issues in the country, but it was the issue that actually launched Trump. But I'm a very conservative Republican, and Cruz was my man all the way, and I'm disappointed that things didn't turn out right for him. I think the immigration issue will be a big one, and of course there's been some discussion that maybe Trump's not as vigorous on it as he pretended in the beginning.
Right.
At this point, I think that, and unless he absolutely destroys the Bernie voters, I think he will pick up several Bernie voters, because if you'll look back in every state primary where you could go in on the day of the vote and
the open primaries, right?
Right. He really did quite well.
Right.
It was in the restricted primaries where you had to be set on which party you was going to be in.
Well, Taylor, let me ask you this. As a Cruz supporter, do you think evangelicals are going to be comfortable with Trump?
Not necessarily, but let me say this. They certainly are not going to be satisfied with the alternative either.
Right.
And my point in the whole thing is, I'd rather put my vote with someone that I'm not so sure about as I would with someone that I am sure about. And her stance on the immigration goes even much further than does President Obama's current one that he's trying to push through.
Taylor, thank you. Okay, let's talk about it. Taylor, thank you for all that. That's some good areas to discuss. What do you think about some of the stuff here and that evangelical issue?
Well, I think probably Taylor reflects the fact that many evangelicals, despite their reservations about Donald Trump and his character and his behavior, will probably come around to him because they just dislike Hillary Clinton so much. And the same on immigration. Immigration's a clearer case. But I think the Cruz supporters clearly are going to, many Cruz supporters, despite their disappointment, are probably going to come back to Trump ultimately. I think where Trump may have more problems are more moderate Republicans, some that might have floated toward Rubio or toward Jeb Bush or toward Kasich, who will have a problem with Trump on some issues and might be more tempted toward Hillary Clinton. But Hillary Clinton is an extremely polarizing figure to Republicans. Where I think the real election is usually fought in that about 20% of the electorate that considers themselves somewhat independent and doesn't identify with either party. And to the extent that there's, say, 35 to 40% Republicans, a similar number of Democrats in that middle ground, that's where I think the real challenge will be.
And when you, all right, historically speaking,
yeah.
I feel like in the time here recently, obviously the Republican Party has had that evangelical vote.
Yes.
And that's a very important part of their vote. And if you certainly were to look at George W. Bush versus Al Gore, you would have seen that. And this is so different. And there's even been some pains, I guess, among some evangelicals, like Moore over with the Southern Baptist Convention,
yes.
saying, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can do this. The fact that there is that concern from somebody out at like the Southern Baptist Convention, is that going to be a big problem, or does Hillary Clinton unite them?
I think my tendency would be to think Hillary Clinton will still unite them, although I think where is intriguing is in a place like Utah, where there were actually polls that showed that Trump could lose the state to a Democrat, which would be unprecedented simply because of their dislike of his style, manners that runs against so many things traditional Mormons that believe in. But I think on the whole, my guess is that, at least from what we see in some of the polling and what's happened in the southern primaries, that Trump will be able to carry many of the traditional evangelical voters.
Let's go to Teddy. Hello, Teddy.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Hello?
Are you there, Teddy? Yeah, you're on. You can go right ahead.
Yeah, why don't we just have a People's Party? Why do we have to have a Democratic Party and a Republican Party?
Okay. And I think that, I wonder how in play that is. I think there are people that want that. They want to blow up the establishment, whether it be the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. But I think you're seeing voters on that Republican side saying, these people that are in Congress saying don't vote for Trump, I'm going to vote for him just to thumb my nose at this whole thing.
We have a tradition of populism in the United States. In the 1890s, it erupted. William Jennings Bryan, you could make a case, was a sort of Donald Trump in his own way, although very conservative and evangelical. He seized the Democratic Party from the more traditional Eastern interest in behalf of the farmers and the agrarians in the West, who were very much suffering from the economic dislocations that were coming from an early period of globalization. So we've had traditions of populism and dislike for, we've had Huey Long in this in the 20th century who represented that. It's usually been on the Democratic side, the sort of real populist side. In that sense, the Republicans were a little bit more establishment oriented, and this may be a realignment. We may get a realignment of the parties out of this election. You may get a very different Republican Party. I'm not sure you'll get a People's Party, but you'll get something different out of it.
One of the newspapers, when Donald Trump won in, maybe it was Indiana, had the RIP Republican Party, had the coffin with the elephant saying rest in peace Republican Party.
Yeah.
Do you think that's right? Is this a major transformation of the party, or is that just everything's gonna come together and be fine? Or could we see, and I don't know if it's a People's Party, but a completely different party, a new party perhaps? The Republican Party goes away and there is some other party.
Yes and no, in the sense that I think if Trump wins, you could see a very, very different Republican Party representing very different interests than was in the case. If he loses, I think the traditional forces will try to reassert their control. Could be quite a battle, and the Republican Party may not look the same as it has in the last 20 years or so out of that process. But the Democrats may go through a realignment as well. A defeat could strengthen the Sanders forces. For example, if Clinton were to lose to Trump, the Sanders forces could be stronger, and the next time around you could get a much more pure left party in the American spectrum. You could get something more similar to some of the things we see in Europe, more classically defined parties, maybe a multiple party system.
Other countries do have that.
Yeah.
And the United States has not had that.
We've not, because partly our election system favors the two-party process, because we don't have proportional representation, and we have a first-past-the-post type of election system that tends to really benefit the two parties. But you could see a transformation or a change in that.
Let's go to Lucy. Hello, Lucy.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Well, I've got about 3 quick points to make, but first I'd like to say that I've been an independent since 1968 when minimum wage was $1.25 an hour. And I heard Maria say earlier she was getting $2.50 in '63, and I guess, rednecks here in the South like me were only getting $1.25 or probably $1 in 1963. But what I want to say is I've got a prediction here. I'm channeling my inner psychic, and this is what I think. The West Virginia Trumps, they might go for Clinton. Well, these are the same people who gave us the Mothman, okay? So, whatever. And secondly, Bernie, his supporters will probably go home and pout because they're young and they will not vote because their dog isn't in the fight anymore. Because I'm thinking of what the Green Party did back in 2000. And last, if Clinton was if Clinton wins, then the GOP can find their usual scapegoat in aliens. And when Clinton becomes president, she can back that theory up for the GOP by declassifying the Area 51 files and proving the GOP right about all this alien stuff, all these illegal aliens. So that's my theory, because it's all a clown car show anyway, right?
Lucy, thank you for that. A little humor there.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to keep going on.
Okay.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for the call. Let's go to David. Hello, David.
Howdy.
Hi, go right ahead.
I'm 58 years old. I'm not a registered voter, and I have no intentions of registering to vote.
Okay.
And the reasons why is both parties constantly betray their constituents. How this blue state got turned into a red state was Wall Street exported all of our jobs. And then the affluent imported aliens. And Nixon did it, Reagan did it, and then Clinton did it.
And all right, so you are informed, you have an opinion, and yet you're not going to vote.
Who can I vote for?
I don't know.
We need a third and a fourth party that can't be corrupt. Look at all of our jobs that have been exported from the island of Manhattan. They dictate. We have a two-party corpocracy.
Okay. All right. Well, David, thank you. What do you think of that? And that line of thinking?
That view that neither party represents. That's another variable in this election. Could be the fact that many people may not vote. Either they'll be so disliking the two alternatives that they'll simply stay home, and how that will play out and who that would favor is not really clear. But the other thing is there's always a potential. What he reflects is there's a potential for someone to try and tap into that. And I would have thought maybe Trump would have been trying to tap into it, but Trump is he's a millionaire who has exported jobs and has hired illegal aliens. In some ways, he is he reflects people, his supporters have been willing to overlook that about him because of but he's very inconsistent in his own business practices given his political stance.
And you talk about people might not vote, and we just heard from one who's not going to vote. But this election, and I feel like we say this every 4 years, but this is going to be a really negative, nasty election.
Yes.
And that often turns people off.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you have two people with high unfavorables already in Clinton and Trump. And when they just spend all this money making the other person look terrible, what does that do? The research has tended to show, John Gear, my colleague at Vanderbilt, the research in negative campaigning does show that while it can be effective in many ways in terms of delineating the differences and helping a candidate to win, it also can have the other effect of turning off voters and making them less willing or less interested in coming. I actually think, though, that one of the key things will be whether the election is seen as close. If it's seen as close, you're going to have a greater degree of interest. If the polls show a wide disparity, or in a state like Tennessee, it looks like it's not going to matter very much, you may have less turnout. That also tends to happen. Okay, we're going to take a break. Then we'll come back and we will go through the calls. So if you're on the line, hold on, and we'll take a break, come back, and take your calls. Be back right after this.